one of the ways of working out whether people are faking, whether they're lying, whether this is in an interview situation with a criminal that's suspected of murder, is the 3-2-7 ruling. Can you explain that to me in simple terms?
Yeah. So working with that particular patient made me very interested in the psychology of deception. And if you're a forensic psychologist, you're going to get lied to, and you're going to get lied to a lot. Now, my colleagues at the Emotional Intelligence Academy in Manchester have done loads and loads of research into signs of deception, because there's no simple way of telling whether somebody's lying. There's no what we call a Pinocchio's nose. So you know that you'll read in magazines that if somebody's lying, you know, their eyes go up to the left, or their shoulder shifts, or something like that. There's no simple way. Everybody's different. But there's something that we call the 3-2-7 rule. So what we look for are clusters of what we call tells, and they can be anything. They can be facial expressions. They can be something to do with the body language. That might be something physiological. So, for example, Stuart Hazel, who killed Tia Sharp, when he was giving an interview about it to Mark Williams Thomas, the tops of his ears went very, very red, the capillaries in his ears, and that was a sign of stress for him. It's very, very particular to him. So we look for clusters of these tells, 3 of them over at least 2 of 6 communication channels in a period of 7 seconds. So it gets very, very technical. So we're not looking for somebody touches their nose or anything like that. We're looking for a whole cluster of things that happen within 7 seconds that tell us that we need to explore this further, because they might be telling a lie.
And you experienced that with a guy that was, I think he was still in prison for burglary, but it was believed that he'd possibly murdered a man in his bed, right?
Yeah, he had. He'd murdered an old man in his bed during the course of a burglary. And what was very specific about this series of burglaries was that often the person in the household had woken up to find him standing next to the bed, just staring at them while they slept. And if they woke, he would ask them to put their hands on the back of their head, and then he would just stare at them a while longer. And I think it was just a control thing with him. And this old gentleman was found, and he'd been battered to death. And I think what had happened was he'd actually not complied with the request to put his hands on the back of his head. He'd challenged this man Hogan, and this is what it had resulted in. But he was very, very difficult to interview, because he was very much in control of himself, and he would even wait a few beats and he would take a deep breath before he answered any questions. But we'd come up with what we call the silver bullet question, which is a question that somebody doesn't necessarily expect. And I should be very careful here, because when you're doing police interviews, you know, the intention is not to play mind games with people. You see that on TV, but you know, the cat and mouse games that happen in detective series, they don't happen in real police interview rooms. But you know, we do like to watch people's reactions.
On the 3-2-7?
Yeah. So we asked him a particular question, and immediately his whole breathing pattern that he'd been trying very carefully to regulate changed, and his whole body language shifted, and he became very, very evasive. And so we kind of pieced it all together, and he actually led us to the bit of evidence that we needed in order to secure a conviction. And we very much did that by being led by him, allowing him to take control of the interview, but watching where there were these psychological tells.
Was he a psychopath, do you think?
I don't know whether he was a psychopath. He was somebody who liked to be in control, and he was somebody who liked to be in charge. And it emerged that actually what happened was he'd battered this man to death in his bed, but then he'd lifted him out of the bed and he'd actually stood with him and looked at himself holding him in the mirror, because he just wanted to have this moment of, look what I have done. And it was that knowledge that he'd done that we questioned him about, and we got so much psychological information from the way that he responded to it.
And he's not the first person to have liked to hold his victims up close to him.
Well, no, I used to get regular phone calls from Dennis Nielsen. Dennis Nielsen was somebody that I'd met in the prison service, serial killer, if you know, people don't know. He used to phone me regularly because I'd appeared in a couple of TV documentaries talking about him. And one thing Dennis Nielsen likes to do is talk about himself. And so whenever he saw me on TV talking about him, he would ring up to basically to give me his opinion. And he would talk about his offences. And he told me about how he described it as a conundrum for him. Was that he didn't really want to kill people, but yeah, he got so much satisfaction from it that he felt that he was addicted to it, and he couldn't control himself. And he said that it wasn't the killing that was particularly satisfactory for him. It was a particular moment afterwards, and that was when he was able to hold the lifeless body of his victim and look in a mirror. So again, it was this wanting to see this image of himself and remember it as being, you know, supreme and powerful, with the victim as completely passive. He would describe them as, you know, floppy and limp and pale, and there was him able to hold them in whatever position he wanted to while he looked in a mirror.
And was that sexual, do you think?
Oh gosh, yeah, it was very much sexual. But I always say that you look for the sexual needs and the emotional needs, and I always think that the sexual needs are secondary to the emotional needs. So for Nielsen, who'd been bullied as a child because he was gay and he was effeminate, and the boys at school used to mock him and exclude him, this was him being able to be this masculine, powerful, in his own mind figure. Now, there's something very, very wrong, isn't there, if you have to kill somebody to be able to do that
and continue to kill people.
Yeah, but that's how it was for him. And then, of course, he had a body that he had absolute power and control over.